Good morning, class, the receiving school students and teachers.
Good morning, Mrs. Watagas.
How are you all this morning?
We are very well, thank you, and how are you?
I'm very well, just like you all. Thank you. You may be seated. Now we are on a new strand, and in that new strand we have 3 substrands and also 3 outcomes. What is the new strand that we are looking at, Linda? What is the new strand we are looking at? Managing resources. Good, thank you. Managing resources is the strand. Now, there are 3 substrands. Aloysia, what is one of the substrands we looked at? What is one of the substrands we looked at in the previous lesson? Land and water. Terence, the other substrand we looked at besides land and water? Environment. Okay, good. Environment is the second substrand. Carry out the last substrand under the strand managing resources. Crops and animal management. Okay, crops and animal management. So there are altogether how many substrands? 3 substrands under the strand class managing resources. Now our lesson activity for today, I'd like the class to read that together. Okay, so that is going to be our lesson today. You will be viewing a tape to the receiving school students and the teachers. Our lesson is on viewing a tape, and the tape is titled Bush Bagger Up. Now, the title of the tape already gives you the clue of the type of tape that we will be viewing. Now, in viewing the tape, there are a few things that I'd like the class, the receiving school students also to take note of. And they are, the first one, class, read it together. Okay, so as you view the tape, you have to identify 1, the different types of environment. 2, groups 1 and 2, read it for us. Okay, you have to, while you are viewing the tape, try to identify the types, different types of resources that are being damaged and also polluted. Now, if the teachers in the receiving schools can help and get those, whatever the students are going to be identifying while viewing the tape, done the first and the second, before I can go on to the next 3. Now, the third, I'd like the class to read it together. Okay, concerns of the landowners. In the tape, you will be seeing landowners airing the concerns and all that. I'd like you to take note of that too as well. Groups 3 and 4, if you can read for us the 4th thing that you have to identify while viewing the tape. Okay, that is another thing you have to identify while viewing the tape. What the landowners could have done. There are some concerns that they will be raising. Now, to avoid that, what could they have done in the first place? 5 and 6, the 5th thing to identify. Now, you will see the governor for Milne Bay, Mr. Tim Neville in the tape. He also has his concerns, and I'd like you also to identify those concerns too as well. Now, to the receiving school teachers, once again, if you can have all those 5 areas that the students will identify while viewing the tape up. Now, this is important because it will help the students in the follow-up lesson on viewing the tape.
Tonight on Four Corners, the Amazon on our doorstep. Malaysian timber companies are ripping the heart out of Papua New Guinea's virgin forests, and they'll stop at nothing. Welcome to the program. What you're about to see will incense anyone who cares about the environment. It will also bring a few wry smiles in Canberra and Whitehall. In recent months, both governments have felt the sting of Malaysian indignation over the supposed cultural insensitivity of Australians and Britons. The colonial villains in tonight's piece are Malaysian, one of them a mate of President Mahathir. Australia's influence in Papua New Guinea has been steadily declining since independence. What presence we do have is often controversial, witness Octedi and Bougainville. But Port Moresby's Look North policy has brought in a whole new breed of exploiters. Deborah Richards reports on the wholesale devastation of one of the world's last great wilderness areas.
Through the millennia, New Guinea stood shrouded and aloof. While the rest of the world hurtled through the Industrial Revolution and into the 20th century, few outsiders penetrated this island's dark heart. By oversight or design, this is one of the 4 largest intact rainforests left on Earth. Just last year, a previously unknown tribe made first contact. And in this last, vast tract of Asian Pacific forest, plants and animals are still being discovered unknown anywhere else on Earth. From the canopy to the forest floor live a showcase of the rare, the exotic, and the beautiful. John Firamo and Albert Hombinangi can tell you everything about their part of the forest. Which plants cure disease, where to catch tree kangaroos, and if the hunting's good, how to cook and eat one. Like their ancestors before them, it's an abundant wealth they expect their children to inherit. But the lifespan of that heritage now can't be counted in centuries or even decades, but in years. Timber's the new gold, and there's a ferocious rush to grab it. This single rosewood tree has a premium value internationally. On some markets, it'll fetch a princely sum, currently about $2,000. As other sources of tropical timber dry up, its value is skyrocketing. New Guinea's forests are now valued at up to $200 billion. It's a bonanza that's unleashing a killing field. In the space of just a few years, New Guinea's become the new Amazon. At current allowable rates, the whole resource could be gone in this generation. Big timber grabs fueling greed and corruption and leaving devastation in its path. As the chainsaws from foreign logging companies rip at the heart of New Guinea's forests, the plunder is searing the hearts of many of its people.
So now me and all the people me play start was a poor man. Me play no got one but can help him by practicing sala push from me play wara from me play mantan to say hold him na crown pro go down or karma mo ga taran wara na all piece run weapons no got mo bis lo wara push from me play machine ko no ga ta push run ko
New Guinea's reeling from the shock of a new colonialism. Asian companies, mostly from Malaysia, haul out its riches and ship them to Japan. The mighty Japanese timber mills chew up whole forests each year, spitting them out as disposable chopsticks. Or construction formwork, which ends up being burned. Japan has an endless hunger for tropical logs. Papua New Guinea is one of the few countries in the world that still supplies them. In just 3 years, exports have trebled. And that's rapidly turned the country into one of the last rainforest frontiers. Right at the front line is New Guinea's Minister for Forests. Tim Neville, born in the New Guinea highlands, is battling to control it.
Generally, the industry over the period of time is an attitude of don't care less, have done what they want to do and just carried on under as though that they actually own the whole operations, they own the country, they do what they want to do.
PNG has 18 million hectares of exploitable forest. In just a few years, a third of this whole resource has already been grabbed by the timber tycoons of Asia, and the pressure to get at the rest is unrelenting.
The way they've been behaving is basically pirates, where shiploads of equipment has just turned up in remote ports and they just offloaded it and started to walk it into the jungles. In the past, it's never been controlled, no one's taken it up. If the pressure started to come on, a few dollars would sort of float around immediately and things would be all okay.
We coming here as investors, there are rules and regulations where we have to follow and obligations that we have to deliver.
Not surprisingly, the industry rejects the charges of piracy. Francis Tiong is managing director of Rimban Hijao, the most dominant and aggressive company operating in PNG.
There is no apparent reason why he has to be very critical of us.
Rimban Hijao was built and is still controlled by Francis Tiong's uncle. Datuk Hu King Tong is a towering presence in Malaysia's timber business. His companies have a formidable reputation in Malaysia.
Ruthless, successful, aggressive. Certainly they proven themselves capable of reaping very huge profits within a very short span of time. We have had incidences of the indigenous communities living within the concession areas, making claims as company for violation of land rights, for pollution of water supply, for destruction of games. And we found Mr. Tiong a very difficult man to negotiate with.
Datuk Tiong's a recently retired senator in the Malaysian government, appointed by the king. Yet few Malaysians have ever heard of him. His connections go right to the top of Malaysia's power structure. Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad opened the Tiong's new plywood factory, and 3 recent business associates were sons of the Prime Minister.
It's an all-encompassing network of patronage, from the politicians on top down to the village headmen near where they are operating.
From his headquarters in the remote river town of Cebu in Sarawak, Tiong established a network of small companies that added together make up one of the largest tropical timber empires in the world, and a personal fortune estimated at $1 billion.
Rapid, dramatic emergence. I mean, in the 70s, we hardly heard of Tiong and his family. And in the 90s, he's the the more major in the industry.
The world focused on Sarawak's forests in the late 1980s as Panan and Kayan people took up blowpipes against the bulldozers. World pressure stemmed the wholesale forest destruction. Malaysia banned log exports from most areas. By the late 1980s, the squeeze was on for the loggers to find new fields. Datuk Tiong made a strategic thrust to New Guinea, using a familiar tactic. The assault on PNG forests came with a rush. A myriad of companies started logging all over the country. But what no one realised was that they weren't separate operations at all. Behind them stood one parent, the Malaysian logging giant Rimban Hijao. And ironically, Rimban Hijao means evergreen forest. From their typically low-profile headquarters in Port Moresby, Francis Tiong now operates a vast network. 97% of all the operators in PNG are foreign loggers. But it's been hard for the New Forests Authority to pin down exactly which operators are and which aren't connected to Rimban Hijao. Through tracking company names and check numbers, fax numbers and shareholdings, it seems about 50% of the whole timber industry is controlled by Rimban Hijao. And a sizable chunk of their permits were acquired when there weren't supposed to be any permits being granted by the government at all.
The rise in the export of logs has been absolutely phenomenal.
In 1989, Justice Barnett exposed a raw and rapacious industry. The freeze on permits followed a watershed report of the Barnett Royal Commission, but it was a charade. The industry doubled in size, and much of it was a relative new player on the scene, Rimban Hijao.
The process that you have to go through to be able to get permits is extensive. There are proper formats and procedures, and they've all been broken.
We have the manpower, we have the capabilities, we have the financial support. I believe these are all the essential factors that you have to get things moving.
It was during the freeze on permits that Rimban Hijao were granted Hawaiian on the north coast, and they got in as easy as pie. There's no high-rises at this Hawaiian. There's broken trees and broken hearts. No one here was prepared for the power politics of a billion-dollar cash industry. On the village ground, $50 is a fortune, and higher than some old folk can count. So how could they place a true value on their heritage? A few promises delivered their forest for a bargain basement price. For centuries, the forests that few people here would ever have heard of, suddenly their forests have become a gold mine, and the pressure to get their timber has been intense. For some, that's meant opportunity, but it's left many thousands of people here bewildered and angry and worried about the future for their children. They may not know it yet, but many of these future landowners have already lost control of their future. For one of the clan leaders, Robert Pasu, it's meant opportunity. Rimban Hijao, through its subsidiary Sovereign Hill, got Robert Pasu on side. They paid for him to register a landowner company, a necessary first step to signing a logging contract. At some stage, Robert Pasu enjoyed a fully paid trip to visit Rimban Hijao in Malaysia. And it was Robert Pasu who brokered the logging deal with the other landowners. To do that, he raised the burning issue of government neglect.
The main reasons of people wanting logging companies to go into their area is to our people has been completely forgotten. Our government never want to build roads across to our people.
Yeah, Roberti Tok Long Road. I come up Lumbanis Lumin, I talk also you by giving road Lomi. All right, but me bring road on, company Plumin, but bring road go side Plumin, by some people Plumin, by bringing go back place long. I'm talk also, or I talk yes.
Sovereign Hills built the road, but when it came to royalties, they weren't so generous. Last year, for each cubic metre, a lump of wood about the size of a tea chest, the loggers got an average $200, but the clans got around $9. Now the Ripoffs dawning on them.
Company kishim tasal money only pay me kam lo me blame lik Thomas. Now suppose one block clan me blame like kishim 2,000 or 3,000 and me blame tili me go finish nothing. Na display me no ablo holy me blame 1 block 2 block moon me by finish long 2-3 days. So I'm all planning or something was me blame by him hard now.
Logging started here last year, but disputes have ground it to a halt. There's disputes over clan boundaries, and some are claiming that Robert Pasu doesn't have their interests at heart. And there's been ugly scenes as antagonism to the logging has been met with violence.
All young man will cross me because me pushing this la company concert on grabbing ground on a sandy blong. Not see me no one pel or sell on company staff or company walk out as all.
While the local politics gets more tangled and heated, the foreigners are cutting back. They've already got out over $3 million worth of timber, and while there's an impasse here, Sovereign Hill are moving out equipment. Legally, the responsibility isn't theirs. The mess stays with the landowners. But the company man on the ground knows what's caused the problem, the way the permit was rushed through in the first place.
Most of the people here are not aware when the company, laying on the company, bring the contractor company come inside here for doing the logging. They are not, some of them are not aware.
All right, mibla mo ino mo pili blon la company now. Wali kam long krisi mibla ta solong poli mibla.
Robert Pasu now spends most of his time in Port Moresby, where he can be contacted through a subsidiary of Rimban Hijao. For Albert Hombinungi and John Firimo, the future's not so clear. The road for which they traded so much is disintegrating as fast as their hopes. Albert signed away his assets with a cross. Now he realises his mistake.
Na long mi et mi lukim 60-40 wa mi pin ko emi faula na min no sabe na starboy. Mi ko long chairman long len on a company emi to ko lukim Sovereign Hill manager. Mi go lukim manager long Sovereign Hill emi to ko lukim chairman. Number uside by mixing help now.
I fear bad things. The villages of the people are basically going to tell the government that, you know, that's enough. You've just gone too far. A lot of my friends have told me that Papua New Guineans are very patient, but I think that patience is running out. That patience is running out very, very fast.
Tim Neville's been Forests Minister now for 16 months, and he's battling to clean up an industry run riot over the country and its people.
What really hurts me and disturbs me is that we have countries from overseas who've lost those resources now turning their attention and focusing on a country like Papua New Guinea, who are trying to rip it out and exploit it to their own benefit and gains. At the end of the day, in the long term, it'll be the people of Papua New Guinea who will suffer.
Neville's no greenie. At the age of 20, he took over the family's plantation business and launched it into earth moving and road building. Coacon's now the largest civil engineering business in the country, and Neville, aged 37's a multimillionaire. His company hasn't been immune to allegations of favourable government treatment. Now he's taken his bulldozer style to politics, and he's taking on the most powerful forces in PNG's political economy.
As I've been saying to them, look, if we go to your countries, you expect us to perform. Vice versa, we want you to do the same and to behave yourselves when you come to our country. And if you don't like it, then my attitude and the government's attitude is pack up and get out.
I would take it, he is critical of the industry itself, not as a particular critical level at Rimban Hijao.
While he chooses his words carefully, Francis Tiong believes the minister just likes to be a big shot.
The minister is critical, and then I think it will be some self-centered problems rather than in the industry problem.
He has my sympathy if he has the political integrity. Of course, Papua New Guinea is a different country and I should not interfere in internal affairs. But you can expect to look at the tenacious will of Rimban Hijao to protect interests. That has been their pattern in Sarawak. They will not stop at nothing to protect their interest.
Neville's pushed through a raft of reforms which are designed to rein in the rate of logging and pull the industry into line. He's phasing out log exports to encourage sawmills and investment and jobs. The reforms also plan to take some of the loggers' huge profits and invest them in trust funds for landowners' future use. But on this one, he lost. The campaign against it was so fierce that the whole plan backfired. In the end, companies agreed to pay more export tax, but the government gets the money. And once again, the landowners have missed out. Neville's on a mission to talk to the real landowners. If he can win their support, he can weaken the industry grip on the country. This is his first tour, and he asked Four Corners to inspect the problems with him.
Debbie, what we've got here is definitely in the order of about 15 to 20%.
The hottest logging area in the country is West New Britain. Last year, a third of all the logs shipped out of New Guinea came from this island alone. It's a stronghold of industry. The whole of West New Britain's lowlands is tied up in logging concessions, just leaving the steep mountain spine. On this first leg of the tour, Neville's inspecting Central Araway, held by the Malaysian company Chakra Alam. Neville's the first minister ever to visit this area, and as a big man, he's welcomed royally. Despite the respect shown by the Sing Sing greeting, the people haven't welcomed his reforms. It's a familiar story. When they wanted development, the government never delivered. Now Neville's trying to give them better returns for their forests, but he's been greeted with suspicion. The logging company's number one because they offer development. It's the modern equivalent of trinkets and beads. The chairman of the landowner company's enthusiastic about their logging fortunes.
Last month, developed in area. Because I think in a long time, 5 or 6 money go finish. Maybe I've been working some service will come inside. Or some long outboard motor now, lot transport. I think maybe I got 20 or 30 board now. Step long and long now.
Neville's here to explain. The government doesn't want to stop them having a road or outboard motors, but they're selling themselves short.
Now DY come up dry Plumuni now. You got big pipeline. And people are like looking resource centers. All it gives him this extra toya, long revenue system. You've led by massive blowing you and you walking project blowing you.
While there's strict new control measures being talked about, the logging's still virtually uncontrolled. This is the Luck concession at the bottom of New Ireland. 80,000 odd hectares of what 4 years ago was a rugged and environmentally significant forest.
Okay, well, I'm a bit disturbed with this particular project that we're looking at the moment, where there's a certain amount of clear fell.
This is a Rimban Hijao concession, and last year they did indeed get lucky. Timber prices skyrocketed, and they've scrambled for the timber.
What I see as far as...
It's called selective logging. It's supposed to leave the forests able to regenerate. In reality, it's rape. Scenes like this are duplicated all around the country, but with forestry officers scarce on the ground, the companies can just let it rip.
But as you can see by the terrain of this country, it's extremely steep. So any soil erosion that we get in the hills here is just going to end up down on the waterfront there, which will affect their reefs.
How many people have you actually got on the ground to enforce these things?
At the moment, we don't have anybody.
So that could explain why the industry got out of control here.
Definitely. The government just has not had the people on the ground to control it in the past.
Neville also saw piles of undersized logs, so he dropped in to check it out.
Who's your camp manager? Going to Mossy. Mossy, yeah? Yeah.
Here the minister wasn't expected. No Sing Sing here, just confusion at a minister dropping from the sky.
Right. This is all diwaya. This is all sememia. Look at some liglig through. Right there. No, emia. Plenty through.
At the Luck concession, they've been caught red-handed.
You know, isn't it 50 centimetres and above? I even noticed up in the back of the bush here that you've got a lot of logs that are at least below this.
Is that?
Yeah. Because when time you look him out, look at them all.
They've been small.
Yeah, they're all undersized.
This la problem, this true, me talk sabi long you've la, no, this got Kim long me pla long office long up you talk sabi long up. It's me for me that's all.
Yeah, no me sorry. But you look at some you're a foreman and you supervise on the bush, then more some place he killed too much too. Now you let down him all get a DY on place kill you and behind time blood rain him all get about bugger up. All right.
And the visit triggered an impromptu meeting with landowners. They say they're being underpaid and services aren't being delivered.
Permit condition long or kata pelesh. People like only must fulfill him long the sala Amasia now operation you go finish.
The Rimban Hijao company here has already been suspended once, and now they'll be investigated again.
This is one of the biggest problems I have with the industry, that in the past there's just been blatant disregard to their permit conditions and to the law of the land.
Further north on New Ireland, Neville's got a different set of problems. This is Rasrik Suralil. While the jungle vines now mask the damage, large sections of these forests were so devastated by 5 years of logging, they'll never grow back. When the Singaporean company Santa first arrived in 1987, they promised the world. But Santa, said the Barnett inquiry, took them for a ride.
Some people got need long name. All schools will me play, all church will me play, all roads will me play bagar up. Now on agreement he been go finish. That's all something he ruin bagar up. Plus environment will me place bagar up. You know got compensation. You know got one something by bringing back him by papa ground hamamas.
Santa was slated by the Barnett inquiry for massive corruption, and they finally did build the promised sawmill. But it ran for just 2 years. It sawed up the last of their timber, then it stopped. It's now an idle testament to their failed aspirations for development.
Me been look round inside long area belong me. Na me been look him all this pala problem. Na me been worry no good through long in. Me look him broke down belong society. belong all people. Me look him all people, all he lose him natural dignity belong all, you may call him long talk English. All he lose him respect belong all. Me look him one flamani hamamas long kiss him 2,000, 5,000 kina royalties. Na me hamamas true long kiss him. Na me ting him all timber belong him, all he been kiss him, all he been sell him long 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 kina. Now all pikinini tumbuna belong this palaman. By all he kirap no good true, na ting pupu belong me pala, I long. I bagarap him through ground belong me pala, all get a DY go pinis. Some flaman I rich through long all this la DY belong you mean, you mean no got. You me depend now long all handouts on government.
Now you pala.
The minister explains how he sees the problem.
This is trouble come up in our Asplong old people. In our Asplong old developer, ask for long government tassel. Government strong long gonna second all this or something.
The new policy of phasing out log exports could revive their mill.
Maybe talking about developer long year 2000. Now I got more logs by God.
Despite the salesmanship, there's a looming danger that Neville's big industry vision may regulate the sector but still leave the landowners powerless.
People belong you me.
At the people's level, the future is very bleak. We need to change the trend of development in the country.
Foreign companies aren't getting more logging through the minister, so now they're going around him. The most serious attack has been launched by a cabinet colleague, the Minister for Agriculture.
This is a new concept which we have developed in Agriculture Department following...
Mr. Avara has a plan. Vast areas of forests should make way for oil palm plantations.
So this integrated agriculture project will have the forest logging components, then the soil land use component, which my department is responsible of.
But many see the oil palm proposal as a backdoor way to clear fell logging. So far, 4 projects totalling almost 1 million hectares have been slated for the oil palm. The first project just happens to be in the minister's home area. Logging equipment's already started work, as shown by this amateur video. In theory, these projects should all have forestry approval. But Mr. Avara plans to get agriculture exempted from forestry laws. Avara's done his sums, on the forestry at least. How much do you expect that the projected income from Parari going ahead will be?
Timber is about, in 3 years, will be about 40 to 50 million, and government would have earned more than 100 million. But in terms of oil palm, I haven't worked out, but it's going to be quite substantial there.
Are there any figures for projected oil income?
No, not at this point. It's the point in time. I could find out, but there were figures mentioned, but I forgot.
Great fanfare accompanied the sealing of the deal with a Singapore-Malaysian company, Liani. Are you getting any benefit yourself from the project going ahead?
I wish I could, but my brother will, because he's the chief of one of the chiefs in my family will, yes.
But you yourself have not got a special relationship with the Liani company?
No, not at this point in time.
But Four Corners has obtained bills for Mr. Avara's apartment in Port Moresby. While he's paying for his power, Liani's paying his rent. Mr. Avara says this is just a confusion.
What Liani's been given, the flat, was a flat given to the landowner chairman.
And the landowner chairman just happens to be Mr. Avara's nephew. Avara's plans will now be battled in cabinet. If he wins, he'll be overturning 16 months of reform and delivering the country back to the hands of foreign timber interests.
I reckon this box over here might have some in it.
Neville can't afford to underestimate the sheer clout wielded by money politics, and he's preparing his department for the challenge.
It's got water damaged over the last week or so since we've had that heavy rain.
He certainly inherited a mess.
I think that it's all got
He's promised to renegotiate all existing forestry permits. Only the new forestry personnel are having trouble finding them in the old filing area before they can review them. Neville hasn't issued any new permits since he's been in power, while they get their house in order.
No filing, no...
Officers in remote locations are getting new training and equipment, and an international security firm's being hired to bolster enforcement at export points right across the country.
On policy, on paper, the reform is happening. I mean, that's a credit we need to give to the Forestry Department and the government. So that really is the positive aspect of this reform, only on paper. In the field, the reforms are just not happening. It's just not there. I mean, you walk in and you see it for yourself. It's everywhere.
But Minister, you've been in government now for 16 months talking tough, but daily your investigators in the department are getting reports of illegal shipments, substitution of timber, transfer pricing, and the whole situation on the ground doesn't seem to have changed.
I've actually found it terribly, terribly frustrating myself because I come from a commercial background and I believe when you snap your fingers, things happen immediately. Unfortunately, it's been a very slow, painful process.
One action that has been taken has the industry squealing. The Forestry Authority found that $120 million worth was shipped out undeclared in 1992. So now they're cross-checking all the export documents. If the figures don't add up, the minister's holding up the ship. He's held up several Rimban Hijao ships, costing them $3.5 million in demurrage fees.
You know, you can talk and talk until you go blue in the face, but at the end of the day, the only way to control them is through the pocket. And I've been holding export permits up deliberately and throwing back where in the case that if they haven't been performing under development, the infrastructure, plus also the export exchange value on their contracts, I've just been holding them up until they change.
But playing hardball with timber barons invites a hostile response. 2 months ago, the government staved off a bill which would effectively have undermined all the reforms. The minister believes that some of its supporters were sponsored. When you say sponsored, what do you mean?
Well, one could only assume that money had to be been put up.
And it nearly railroaded your reforms.
It exposed me terribly over that 8 months, had me out on a limb.
The timber bill was defeated by shoring up numbers behind the scenes. Being Minister of Forests is a powerful position, and the currency on offer is high.
Well, I've had bribes, straight out open bribes of anywhere between $1 million kina to 20 million kina in any denomination in any currency in the world, or any country in the world, I should say.
They were serious offers?
Oh, they were serious offers, all right.
Who offered it to you?
That I can't really say.
Why not?
Well, because there's investigations, and also if we can, we will be pressing legal and criminal charges against those people concerned. So they're currently under investigation, so I don't want to sort of alert anybody at this stage.
It was a major company?
Oh, there were a number of companies, not just one particular company.
But Neville's reluctance to play the game has upped the stakes. The pressure's relentless and threatening. For the last 6 months, he's had a 24-hour bodyguard. The battle has been played very tough. You've nearly lost your life.
That's correct. Twice, in a matter of fact, within a matter of a couple of days. One was outside the Airways Motel in Port Moresby at 6:30 at night time, where 3 armed marsmen tried to hold me up with brand new homemade, or sorry, not homemade, but brand new pistols. And then 2 days later, outside my own home, when I came home from Parliament just after finishing a session there, where 5 masked gunmen tried to shoot me as well. So it has been very difficult. A couple of times I've had to move my family offshore out of Papua New Guinea into Australia because of the threats.
How do you know those? Neville raised these threats in Parliament and alleged they were related to timber interests.
Well, because we've done some backtracking through the underground contacts that we have, and we have actually caught a couple of the people involved, and after questioning, it's been taken back to those timber operators.
Who was behind it?
I don't want to expose that at this stage because there is investigations going on.
But you do know?
Oh, we've got a very, very good idea.
Is it a major industry player?
Well, not just one major industry player. There's a couple of them.
Large-scale forestry won't stop under the new plans, but companies are being forced to face up to the rules. Sustainable harvests, the end of log exports and downstream processing is in sight. All the companies who've been exploiting the country are still there, only now they're under pressure to buckle under. Even, it seems, Datuk Tiong. Last week, Datuk Tiong made a fleeting visit to Port Moresby to meet the Prime Minister and the Minister for Forests. But if there's a political setback, the whole momentum could collapse.
The thing is going to blow up, basically. Blow up, I mean, Tim's got some very, very sound ideas. I mean, it's a pity he's putting his guideline online temporarily to accommodate grievances from the landowner companies. That's a real pity. Tim Neville is a tough man. He's taken a lot of threats, and he's still going on. If Tim goes out, unless we get another minister who's just as streamed into their thoughts as Tim is now, I think I feel sorry for the forestry sector in this country.
Now the world's found New Guinea, and the force of the rush is laying it bare. At risk is a global treasure, a nation's sovereignty, and the dignity of its people. They've got just one chance to sell the family jewels. Having withstood millennia, now suddenly time is not on the side of the forests or its people.
That's our tape on bush bagarap. Now, our next lesson activity is going to be a follow-up activity on the tape. Now, what is going to be our key phrase? Our key phrase? Tape viewing, tape viewing. Now, tape viewing, what is it all about? What is it all about, Brendan? The tape is titled Bush Bagarap, but it all has to be, they're all talking about, Tricia, environment or managing resources. With that, good morning, everyone.